Okay, so I wanted to take a few minutes and walk through my own concept map of Marx and Marx's argument, so that you can kind of supplement this with your own concept map that you have developed as well, and kind of compare and contrast and kind of get you on the right page with thinking about Marx's basic argument. And so I want to do this by starting with Marx's fundamental argument in the Communist Manifesto. If you remember back in the Communist Manifesto, he starts off by arguing that all history is the history of class struggle. And this is a centerpiece for Marx in understanding not only capitalism, but all of kind of world history. He starts with this empirical claim that all history is the history of class struggle. And so we're going to anchor his argument inside of that claim. Now, remember, Marx is a historical materialist. And what this means, of course, is that he looks for the sort of material relations that exist within any given society at some historical moment to make sense of what's going on. And this is both going to frame his answer to this question, but you should also see it as embedded in the question itself. He's asking a question about a material phenomenon, class struggle. And so that's the kind of framework in which he's developing both his questions and his answers to that question. So as a historical materialist, this means that Marx is going to start with the mode of production. In understanding the dynamics of any society, for Marx, he argues we have to understand its mode of production. And all modes of production are comprised of the forces of production and the relations of production. The forces of production are really the kind of technological inputs into how production takes place. And this is comprised of the means of production and labor power. Means of production are all of the land, the machinery, the tools, all of the physical objects that go into producing goods and services in a society. And of course, labor power is the thing that the workers have, and that they put into the means of production to actually produce things, right? So it's the combination of labor power and means of production that is producing the particular dynamics of the forces of production, right? The relations of production are, importantly for Marx, really about who owns what, the kind of social relations in which production takes place. And so for Marx, a critical question to ask is, who actually owns the means of production? And this produces for Marx the definitive kind of class structure of the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. I mean, at least inside of capitalism. But that's the key question for Marx in the relations of production. Who owns what? How do those social relations play out? Okay, so we've got a kind of basic framework now, a historical materialist framework. And of course, we're undergirding this inside of capitalism, right? This is modernity for Marx, and you really want to see that. For Marx, modernity is this new this new mode of production called capitalism. So in answering this question of class struggle, we're going to situate it inside of capitalism and understand how class struggle plays out inside of a capitalist mode of production. Okay, so the fundamental feature Marx argues about for capitalism is that there's this unique dynamic process called capital accumulation that is going on. So what it is that capitalists want, right? What it is that capitalists are trying to accomplish is to accumulate ever greater amounts of capital. He also talks about this as surplus or wealth or profit. All of these are kind of synonymous terms in this context, at least, of capital accumulation. And this, again, is rooted in this process is going to be rooted in the fact of commodities, these unique things within capitalism that are called commodities. What makes commodities unique is that they have both a use value and an exchange value. The use value being its particular utility as an object for us in our daily lives. But importantly, inside of capitalism, all of those use values also comprise exchange values. All commodities have exchange values. This is, in fact, what makes them commodities. That is to say, this is what makes them able to be bought and sold, right? So all commodities have exchange value, and that is their price on a particular market, right? Their capacity to be sold means that they have to have a price, right? So we have then bundles of commodities that get exchanged in certain ways, and of course we want to remember those MCM versus CMC kinds of exchange commodity circulations that take place. And the key thing for capitalists is that they need to increase the surplus, increase that M, right? M to M prime, right? And that's going to define for us then what capital accumulation is and looks like. Now, the distinctive thing Marx tries to highlight for us is that for capital accumulation to take place, capitalists have to exploit workers. They have to give back to workers less than those workers put into the production of commodities. That is, they have to extract surplus labor. And they do this by reducing the amount that's required for necessary labor to take place, mechanization and so forth, that reduces the amount of necessary labor time to increase the amount of surplus that they're capturing during the working day. This process of exploitation, or this link between capital accumulation and exploitation, is why you should understand Marx sees capitalists and workers as having antagonistic class interests. Capitalists have to accumulate capital. The only way for them to accumulate capital is to exploit workers. So in order for capitalists to get what they need, workers have to be exploited. And of course, workers do not want to be exploited, and this produces this antagonistic relationship between these two classes. And it is this relationship, Marx argues, that produces the class struggles that we see and that he actually saw in his own day. Hanging around in London, he saw real class struggle taking place between factory workers and the owners of those factories, right? And so exploitation is the thing that produces class struggle, and this is necessitated by capital accumulation, which is made possible by the structure of commodities inside of capitalism. It's also the case, as Marx goes to links to show us, that this process of capital accumulation is intimately linked with alienation of workers. And workers become alienated from who they are because they have to basically give up themselves to capitalists so that capitalists purchase them for a given period of time, and then basically for that period of time tell them what they're going to do. Capitalists control the process of production. They control the end point of production, that is the products that are produced in production. They then control the relations between workers on the shop floor. And through all of this, Marx argues workers become alienated most clearly from their species being. And this, Marx also argues, leads back into this process of class struggle. So this is sort of a way in which you can see us putting together all of the different concepts we've been developing out of Marx into making sense of how he understands modernity, that is, how he understands the rise and dynamics of capitalism and what this does to individuals inside of this new mode of production. I hope this is helpful, and I will talk to you later.